Okay, I'll just get started. My name's Robert Auger. I'm with Dynamics, security engineer there. I'm just going to do a talk about the risk associated with RSS and Atom feed readers. In a nutshell, really high-level overview. You can do it's a neat little vector to have additional uses of cross-site scripting among other things, and I'll walk you through a few demos. So I'm going to describe what RSS and Atom feeds are, the application types using them, what I tested, how I tested them, the different types of applications that utilize a feed, what I found, and some of the things people can do to fix it. So before we talk about how to attack them, here's just a review for some people who aren't familiar with them. They're a way to share content. You use it for news stories. You can share MP3s, movies. Blogs will often have RSS generators built in. So like if you're posting something on your blog, it'll automatically populate that to an XML file that you can use to syndicate the content with. They don't require the user necessarily to visit the site. Kind of the point of it is that you don't have to keep visiting your favorite website. You can just subscribe to this and use a local client, and it will basically fetch the headlines and a description of the story, and if you want to read it, you can. And RSS and Atom are the most popular feeds in use. There are a few other ones. Some people have done some custom ones as well. RSS by far is more popular at the moment. Here's just an example of what each feed looks like. RSS is on the left, Atom's on the right. I highlighted in blue some of the differences. Atom has some additional functionality that kind of extended the concept of RSS. You can see that they have titles and subtitles, and they added some stuff for hashing in order to help differentiate things. Wow, you're right, you can't, can you? Where is the RV guy? Can one of the stream guys fix that? It's working over here. I guess for now, I'm sorry, you're going to have to look over there until they fix that. So basically, here are examples of the two types of files. As you can see in the description field, it's basically a description of the text. The link is where that text is a brief description of, things like that. Whoops. So here's just kind of a background of RSS and Atom, created by Netscape in '99. Same people brought you cookies, multiple versions. Atom was created by Sam Ruby on his wiki. And eventually it grew out of his wiki, and I moved over to the Atom Pub working group. Multiple versions of Atom, basic stuff. So sites like CNN, MSNBC, Slashdot, they all provide feeds. They want to attract people to their site. Like in other words, some people want to be able to subscribe, like you're in a website like Bloglines. It's kind of a place where you can subscribe to multiple resources, and in one location you can read all of them, and you don't have to go out to all these different sites. And they're actually pretty popular. Some people put them on their website. They download a feed and they utilize the feed's content and display that on their website. Some people do that for search engine optimization, because you're always getting scrolling dynamic content. So some people may subscribe to a feed with certain buzzwords that they kind of want their site to be known for, and then they'll update that every hour or 5 hours or whatever the time specified in the feed is. Once again, pretty much most major blogs will automatically have RSS built into it, or Atom. Like WordPress, as an example, will automatically generate the feed off of user comments or off of the news stories themselves. BitTorrent, there are some extensions to that which allow downloading lists of torrents and providing sharing that way as well. So you have producers and you have consumers. The producers will create the feed and store it in an XML file, or they'll have it in a database and then they'll dynamically generate it and kind of stream it over to whoever's requesting it. The consumers are obviously the things that are using them. You got websites, things like that. So there's multiple different types of consumer types. You have standalone clients. Basically, they'll be like a browser or a standalone application that you'll download just for the purpose of reading feeds. some peer-to-peer clients as well will use them. You have online readers such as blog lines or like Google Reader, things like that. And one of the things that's starting to grow is people downloading the feed, and as I mentioned on the previous slide, displaying that feed's content on their own site. And in some cases, they even take that content and then put it into their own feed. So let's say, for example, you're running a security site and you want to provide security news. Well, you may subscribe to 10 different security feeds, take their content and stick it into your feed and kind of provide your users with a rundown of everything so they don't have to subscribe to a bunch of sites. And definitely people are doing that. So I tested all three of the different types of client readers. I tested a few popular browsers, tested the popular standalone RSS readers and Atom readers, which I'll demonstrate a few things that I found. So one of the most important things is, okay, you can put stuff in a feed and do evil things, but you have to get it in there first, right? So you're in the situation where, okay, that happens if A, the feed producer is malicious. So let's say I want to hack my users for some reason. I can put something in there. It's not really going to be the most popular use case. Hundreds of sites are defaced daily. What if instead of defacing the sites, they just decided to start injecting attacks into the feeds? So let's say, for example, that there's 100 websites, 50 of them have feeds, and a couple thousand people are subscribed to those feeds. Rather than defacing the site and being noticed, I mean, they could just put an attack into that feed, and now they're owning all the users. So that's kind of a more useful use case for that. Some feeds are created from mailing lists or news entries, things like that. So let's say I post something to let's say the web security mailing list. That somebody may grab that mail spool and then generate a feed off of that. I actually do that myself for that particular list. And it's possible that somebody could send a malicious an email with an evil attack in it. And if I'm not filtering when I'm converting that stuff into my feed, it's possible that that can be another attack vector as well. And it's just worth mentioning, but it's mostly unlikely. It's possible somebody could like proxy cache poison if there's a proxy between you and it. Just worth mentioning. It's not likely. So one of the first things I did was I tried to figure out, okay, so we have these feeds. Originally I started looking into it because I wanted to provide a feed on my own site, and I kind of had to learn about them. And I was basically, okay, what is the common types of stuff that's in that feed that people care about? You'll usually have the title of the site providing the feed and the description of the site providing the feed. And then you'll have the individual story information like the title, the length, the description, the author, and there's multiple other tags as well. So in a nutshell, I created a bunch of different feeds, and I kind of tested different scenarios. So I created a bunch of feeds, and I looked at all those popular common elements, and I started, just as a smoke test, I just started trying to inject like script in there, like JavaScript, just to do an initial smoke test. So some of them, some of the readers behave differently. If I injected literal script, some of them would complain. If I HTML entity encoded some of the tags like left bracket, right bracket, things like that, some of them allowed that, and some of them actually reconverted that when they presented that information. And some of them will only allow like the left tag to be HTML entity and the right tag. So I kind of tried various different combinations to kind of see the different types of behaviors that these applications had. So this is just an example of one of the initial smoke test feeds that I created. You can see here that I just tried pop-ups initially, basic test, everybody does it. And I just tried it in all the popular things. On the left is RSS, on the right is Atom. You can see Atom is a little more to it. They have additional functionality. RSS is kind of simple, hence really simple syndication. So this is the literal HTML injection where I just literally stuck it in there, and this is the HTML entity one. As you can see, instead of a left bracket, you have ampersand LT, semicolon, and the corresponding tag to that. XML specifies that if you have certain tags, like let's say for example that I just had one left bracket, it says that you should be converting that to an HTML entity for storage. And actually in this example, technically I'm closing the script tag, so technically that's valid XML. However, I was kind of wondering, I'm like, well, if they're meant to convert that, I wonder if I can just put that in there and if that'll work. So that's something that I tried. And this is just the combination example On the left, you can see I have the entity. On the right is just the literal tag for that. So I tested a couple of web-based readers. I basically put up a bad feed on my own site, and I started subscribing to it. And traditionally, the literal tag injection is what worked, because the online readers they don't really convert the HTML entities to the tags before displaying them. The ones that I tested pretty much just took it literally. So, So some of the things that you can do, common cross-site scripting stuff for like the web-based readers, you can steal cookies. Here's an example of the code below that would send your cookie off to another site. So one of the things that's really starting to pick up this year that people are starting to talk about is cross-site request forgery. In a nutshell, if you're logged into, let's say, a bank, the bank knows that if you send a request to that bank, the bank knows it receives a request, and as far as it's concerned, you're initiating it. Let's say, for example, that I'm logged into my bank, and on another site, I'm logged into another site, and in that site they have an image source tag. In that image source tag, it contains a command for the bank that I'm logged into. Mind you, I have to be logged into it for it to be of any use, but if I'm logged in, and I view that other site, my browser is now going to send a request to that bank. As far as the bank's concerned, I'm logged in. I'm sending a legitimate request. For some of these web-based readers, so this is another thing that you can do with common web-based attacks and injecting this into a web feed. For some of the web-based readers, you could also perform this as well. Now, the context of the vulnerability, for the most part, is within the same site zone. In other words, you can't. When I put an attack into a feed and I viewed that feed on the web-based reader, and that web-based reader was vulnerable, I couldn't start taking cookies from other sites because of browser restrictions. I was pretty much locked into the site that I was looking at. However, I still could do things like cross-site request forgery. And actually, there's a few more interesting things involving JavaScript port scanning that I'll briefly touch, and actually Billy Hoffman will be talking about later, and Jeremiah Grossman. So even when you're locked into the current site that you're on, there are some additional things that you can do. One of the other things that you can do is, if I'm viewing that web-based feed on, let's say, like Bloglines as an example, if they inject something, they can actually record keystrokes. So let's say, for example, that I'm viewing a feed, and let's say that there's like a search engine or there's something else on that same site. If I'm currently viewing that feed, the JavaScript within there has the ability to log the keystrokes, and anything that I'm typing, as I'm typing it, it's sending off a character off to a remote host, and I'll actually demonstrate that in a bit. So how practical is it? Bloglines is one of the first people that I'd smoke tested. I actually used a slightly different feed than the one I had in the example here. In a nutshell, I initially was smoke testing it, and it broke. Like all the HTML broke. So I knew something was there. I just kind of had to tinker around a bit. So in a nutshell, after a lot of tinkering, I started doing the on mouse over attribute. And I noticed that when I did that, they converted it to no mouse over. So they were actually looking for it actively and then flopping it around. So I just capitalized the first letter, and I got around the filter that way. So that's a classic example of only allowing, rather than trying to filter very specific things, you should really just be allowing certain things. Other big websites as well have had some issues. There was an issue last year that Yahoo had in their RSS reader.